Welcome, fellow geeks, to the Geek Test. My name is Simon, and this is where we here at Bennett's BikeSocial take a new bike and get geeky with it. On the dyno, performance testing, measuring real-world tank range and fuel consumption, measuring riding position and ergonomics, and weighing it. And not forgetting a 250-mile ride around the Geek Test route of motorways, A roads, B roads, and in town. And the subject of this week's Geek Test is BMW's 2024 F900GS adventure. But first, let's get geeky with some history. The F800GS was launched in 2008 as a sort of entry-level GS. It had a 21-inch front wheel, long travel suspension, chain drive, and it was lighter and less cumbersome, less powerful, but kind of easier to manage off-road than the 1200. The engine was a 798cc water-cooled 4-valve parallel twin. BMW used a 360-degree crank with both pistons rising and falling as a pair. So this design generates a fair bit of primary and secondary vibration. So BMW used a dummy conrod as a counterbalance, sitting just below the crank. The first F800GS made a claimed 85 horsepower at 7,500 RPM and 59 pound-foot of torque at 5,750 RPM. The 800GS was also notable because the 16-litre fuel tank was at the rear of the bike. It took a surprising 5 years for the F800GS Adventure to arrive, considering it was basically the same bike with a beefier subframe to carry the now 24-litre fuel tank. And then in 2019 we got the F850GS Adventure, only a year after the F850GS. The motor was bored and stroked to 853cc, but also switched to what was then a more conventional 270-degree crank design. Less vibration, counterbalance gears instead of a dummy conrod, and a more compact shape. Power was up 9 horsepower to a claimed 94 bhp at 8,250 RPM, and torque was up to 68 pound-foot at 6,250 RPM, so it was a much higher revving engine as well as pokier. The 23-litre fuel tank was now moved into a conventional position just behind the headstock, and everything else was new: frame, brakes, suspension, styling, and the 850 had more benefits of technology such as multiple riding modes, traction control, cruise control. I ran one out of fuel once for a test, and it did 205 miles with a litre of fuel left. And so here we are in 2024 with the new F900GS Adventure. This particular bike has a few extras, of course. It's a BMW, which I'll get to when it matters. Obviously, this is the F900GS Adventure, not the standard GS, so there are differences between the two bikes, but I'll get to them as they occur. In the meantime, let's start with the motor, because it's the same between the two bikes. If you're familiar with the existing F900R and the XR, then you're going to recognise a lot of this. The F900 GSA motor is an 895cc 270-degree parallel twin with an extra 2mm on the bores of the 850. It's gone from 84 by 77mm to 86 by 77mm, so it's slightly more over square. But there are many other differences over the 850 motor. It has forged pistons instead of cast. It has compression raised with a new cylinder head shape and revised cam timing and fueling, although the valve sizes stay the same. The 900 Adventure keeps the same gearing as the old 850 Adventure as well, but also has shorter final drive gearing compared to the standard 900 GS, presumably to compensate for acceleration lugging that extra fuel around. The exhaust is the same 3-way catalytic converter setup as the 850, but the GS Adventure doesn't get the standard 900 GS's weight-saving Akrapovic end can. The old 850 was Euro 4, the 900 is now Euro 5 Plus spec, which goes to show if you want to make an engine cleaner, making it bigger is a good place to start. The result of all this is a claimed 103 horsepower at 8,500 RPM and 69 pound-foot of torque at 6,750 RPM. So that's up 9 horsepower and 250 RPM and up 1 pound-foot and 500 RPM on the 850. But we don't want to rely on manufacturers' claimed figures here on the Geek Test, so we headed off to BSD's Dyno in deepest, darkest eye green near Peterborough, where Andy strapped the 900 GSA down and put it through its paces. And the results are: the new F900 GSA makes a measured 95.5 horsepower at 8,100 RPM and 65.7 pound-foot of torque at 6,500 RPM, which compares to BMW's claimed figures of 103 bhp and 69 pound-foot. What a linear pair of curves. In power delivery terms, that's about as unremarkable as it gets. The power is almost a straight line from 3,000 RPM up to 5,500 RPM. If you were a fuelling engineer, you'd be well happy with your work. A modern parallel twin is in a comparatively mild state of tune, like the F900 GS Adventure, and it can be an incredibly efficient unit, but on this evidence, it might not be the most entertaining power plant in production. To show you what I mean, here's the F900 motor overlaid with a 2015 R1200 GS, the first of the liquid-cooled 1200s. Now that looks like a more interesting power delivery, a big dip in torque at 5,000 RPM where the motor actually flatlines in power. But look at the steepness of the curve once it comes on cam. As a rider, you'd notice that, as the motor pulling strongly from 5,500 RPM to 6,000 RPM. I mean, it piles on 16 bhp in just 500 RPM. That is what many riders would call engine character. The other thing you'll notice is the 2024 F900 GSA makes near as damn it the same peak power as an R1200 GS did a decade ago. So, I'm sorry, which one's the middleweight again? Anyway, that's enough on the dyno. Let's find out what that means for performance. Right, here's the F900 GSA's 0 to 60. Now, I'm not the best at doing standing starts, but on a full tank, I'll take 3.84 seconds. BMW's claim time is 3.7 seconds. And here's a roll-on in top gear from 40 mile an hour to 60 mile an hour. It takes the F900 4 seconds, or 47.3 metres, to do it. That's the length of about 10 cars, give or take, so that's a pretty decent rate of overtake. So it's no surprise that in town the GS nips away off the lights really easily, punching through the optional extra quick shifter, short shifting away from traffic with a cheery wave. But its main characteristic is it's so flexible and easy to manage. It'll pull 30 miles an hour in top with a bit of lumpiness, but throttle response is even and reasonably tidy. It never catches you out and there's always power on tap, so it's hard to get caught in the wrong gear. It's not the most exciting power delivery. It's not exactly feisty, but it is a very forgiving motor. There's a definite absence of raughtiness or zasp or snap. That feeling you get when you tap the throttle and the bike sort of sits up. This is not a vivacious engine. But on B roads and A roads, it's almost deceptively quick. If you want to get a boogie on, you have to rev it. Up in the upper revs, the engine starts to feel a bit thrashy, and it sounds pretty horrible up there too, as if it doesn't really appreciate the effort. But it's quick enough. You can cover ground more rapidly than it feels like it's doing. And is much happier scudding around at mid-speeds, using its mid-range, shifting between 4th and 5th, keeping just enough power at hand to fire out of corners, but not overloading the senses. On the motorway, the GSA cruises at just under 5,000 RPM at 80 miles an hour, where it feels relaxed and reasonably vibe-free. In fact, you could say it feels less stressy than the old R1200 GS motor, which I always thought felt a bit breathless at cruising speeds. There's plenty of headroom left at that speed for autobahn speeds. I think you might find it topping out somewhere around 136 miles an hour if you take it to Germany. The F900 GSA has the same steel frame as the 850 GSA. The engine is outwardly the same and there's nothing wrong with the existing frame. And the aluminium swing arm and bolted on steel subframe are also the same as the 850. And they're not the lighter redesigned items on the base F900 GS. Brakes are as before. Twin axial 4-pot Brembos on 305mm discs, now with BMW's ABS Pro for cornering, anti-lock braking. Suspension is managed by new, uprated 43mm Showa forks, now with adjustable preload, rebound and compression damping, with a Sachs shock at the back, which on this bike, with its Ride Pro pack, has damping control by dynamic ESA and adjusts damping according to conditions, although BMW specifically avoid the semi-active word. To assess the ride quality, we ride the GSA over the bumpiest road I can find in the UK. It's unofficial, but it's the bumpiest anywhere, this side of cobbles. And the suspension copes admirably. You wouldn't be able to drink a cup of tea, but it doesn't batter your eyeballs out. We then test out the GSA's braking. In dry conditions, on good tarmac with a full tank, we get the F900 GSA to stop in 47.3 metres, which is about right for the class. In town, the main consideration is the F900 GSA's weight, so we fill that big tank up again and plonked the BM on the Geek Test scales, where it came in at 250.4 kilograms. That's just over 4 kilos more than BMW claim at 246 kilos. On the road, the 900 GSA doesn't feel heavy, not in the way a 1250 GS Adventure is heavy compared to a standard GS. Yes, when the tank is full from empty, you can really feel you've topped it up. You can't strap a sack of spuds on the top of the motor and not expect a reaction. But even fully loaded, around town the GSA is agile enough to nip between cars, happy enough to hold a line through a corner. Its riding dynamic is very 21-inch front adventure bike, although mid-corner the Bridgestone A41s feel pretty planted and the suspension does an amazing job of managing weight transfer on a 230mm wheel travel at the front and 215 at the back. The dynamic distinction between 21-inch front and 19-inch front handling is kind of shrinking all the time, but the F900 GSA still works best with a point and squirt cornering style. You pin it on the brakes, you get off the brakes, no trail braking, you flick it in and then bang it out on the gas. Top tip, I generally find dragging the rear brake through the corner gives more confidence in front tyre feel, especially on adventure bikes. On A roads and B roads, the GSA is stable and composed. Even in dynamic mode, there's a gentle waftiness to the suspension which never gets out of control, but actually adds to a sort of feeling of confidence. There's nothing harsh or crashy. If anything, the suspension is a little bit too soft, but anything stiffer wouldn't really suit a bike like this on tarmac at middle of the road pace. It's a well-balanced setup, and on the motorway, the ride comfort feels deliciously smooth. Right, let's talk riding position. The bare BMW facts are an 875mm seat height on a one-piece seat with a fairly narrow taper, big BMW Enduro style foot pegs, typical wide tapered bars, and a fairly stubby little adjustable screen. BMW say the riding position has been modified over the old 850 for better off-road control. They say the bars are 15mm higher than before and the footrests are 20mm lower, and the tank has been reprofiled, all for better stand-up ergonomics off-road. This isn't an off-road test, but those changes make a difference on the road, and nowhere is the road off-road compromise more obvious than the GSA's tapered seat. It's not hugely uncomfortable and it's supportively padded, but after a couple of hours of riding, I'm ready for a half-hour coffee stop because it's just not as wide as a road seat. And that's one of the odd things about bikes like the GSA. On the one hand, you have an enormous tank which encourages you to sit on the bike for hours at a time. And you think, great, let's go touring Scotland. But on the other, they fitted an off-road flavoured seat, when what you really want is something plusher than standard. And the screen is another example. You want something short and stubby for off-road, but on the road, the two-way adjustable screen is basically low and lower. Buffeting is subjective, but for a long-distance bike, a bit more range of adjustment would be helpful. Another compromise is seat height. You want good ground clearance and tall suspension, but for touring, it's nice not to have to take a step ladder to get on the bike. The GSA's 875mm seat height is only 5mm more than the base GS, and because the bike is so slim, it doesn't feel as tall as it sounds. and it's certainly more manageable than the big GS, but it's still up there. I'm 6 foot and I'm both tiptoes on the floor. You can get a lower seat down to 825mm and lowered suspension, which brings it down to a mere 805mm. There are some minor adjustments to the ergonomics on tap. The gear lever tip is adjustable for foot size and the rear brake lever flips over to change in height. The GSA has a reshaped tank too. Capacity is down to a claimed 23 litres. Now this is a Geek Test, so we had to check it. From a full tank, the trip came on almost exactly 200 miles, at which point the GSA was claiming it had 39 miles left. I carried on with the remaining range hitting 0 miles at 229 miles, and then finally the tank ran dry at 245 miles. So that's 40 miles on reserve to empty, and then 15 miles after it says no miles left. The tank took almost exactly 20 litres to fill, plus the 5 litres from a jerry can to get to the petrol station. It was half a mile from where I ran out. So the tank is actually 2 litres bigger than BMW claim. It's a 25 litre tank, so maybe they measure theirs when it's on the side stand? Anyway, after all that, I measured 44.4 miles per gallon against the bike's measured 41.5 miles per gallon. Does anyone ever buy a bog basic BMW with no factory accessories? As usual with BMW, the Test GSA is fitted with some goodies. In this case, it's got BMW's Ride Pro pack, which adds white aluminium metallic paint, Riding Mode Pro, which adds Dynamic and Enduro Pro to road and rain, the quick shifter, BMW's endurance chain, which is now called low maintenance, not no maintenance, a centre stand, fog lights, a GPS mount. That's why I've had that ancient Garmin strapped in while I've been doing the test. It looks marginally better in the video than the bare mounting plate. Keyless ignition, dynamic ESA, and pannier rails, but not the actual panniers. That's a total of £14,690, or £2,340 more than a base GSA, which is £12,350. In terms of rivals to the GSA, well, with that big tank, it's a class of one. The nearest bike in terms of spec and price is Triumph's Tiger 900 Rally Pro. That's £14,695 in the nice grey and orange colour, which is about the same as the BMW. And it's the same sort of peak power, but very different engine character. It's a more direct, physical, visceral, engaging motor, and it certainly feels faster, even if it's not that much more powerful. On the plus side, the Tiger comes with the same level of extras as the GSA with the Ride Pro pack. It's got heated grips, it's got a centre stand, it's got cruise, adjustable screen, hasn't got semi-active, but you don't miss it. And, as a plus, it comes with heated seats, and they're wider, and it weighs less. On the downside, it doesn't come with pannier rails or a 25 litre tank. Other sub-1000cc 21-inch front-wheel bikes include Suzuki's V-Strom 1050DE. That's £14,000, some 700 quid less than the F900 GSA. Same power, has a 6-axis IMU, comes with cruise and cornering ABS, has a quick shifter and has a 20 litre tank and weighs a chunky 252 kilos. And over in the red, or the white, corner is Ducati's Desert X. Same power-ish, again, comes with a quick shifter, cruise control, 21 litre tank, and it only weighs 210 kilos claimed. But it's £15,167 on the road, and if you spec it close to the GSA's standard spec with heated grips and a centre stand, you're looking at £16,500, and you can't adjust the screen. But that's just a few of the F900 GSA's rivals. There are plenty more because it's a crowded market. Probably because there's no dominant bike in the class. The 1250, now 1300 GS Adventure might have the lion's share of the big tank, big adventure bike market, but the smaller GSA never enjoyed the same kind of popularity. Will that change with the F900 GS Adventure? I suspect not. Unlike the big boxer GS, the F900 is a rather generic 270-degree parallel twin, which plenty of other people make, and there's a lot more choice. It hasn't got 1300cc's of bottom end, and the motor won't blow your socks off, and seat comfort is compromised by its need to stay slim between the legs. But there are lots of reasons to love the F900GS. It's much more convenient to use than the big GS Adventure. It weighs less, it's less mass to lug around, it's a bit more involving when you're threading it down a country lane. And this is important, it's less hassle to pull out of the garage and nip off for a quick ride. It's also a lot cheaper, spec for spec. So, seeing as this is the very first Geek Test, for the time being at least, the F900GS is top of the Geek Test leaderboard. Now, if you've got any ideas on how to make the Geek Test better, and please keep them realistic, leave them down below. Also, please ask any questions and I'll do my best to answer them. And I'll see you for the next Geek Test soon. But that's enough of me. You should be outside riding your bike, not watching this. Now, remember to get your insurance from Bennett's, become a BikeSocial member and take advantage of all their offers and competitions and bonuses. And all that remains for me to say is thank you very much for watching.